Hello, my dear students. Today I am going to deal on the topic centralization versus decentralization, which is considered to be the most important topic as far as the public administration is concerned. India's constitution adopted a unique brand of federalism that strove to strike a balance between the unitary and federal systems. On the one hand, the immediate historical context of partition created the imperative for a strong central government that could pursue the task of nation building and democratic consolidation. At the same time, there was the recognition that India's diversity was intrinsic to India's national identity and it could only be preserved through federal accommodation. The central government was given wide-ranging powers which include the power to redraw state boundaries and emergency powers to dismiss state governments and impose the will of the center through presidential rule. This strong center coexisted with a number of unique federal arrangements designed to accommodate the specific linguistic, regional, and more recently ethnic assertions of statehood by offering varying degrees of autonomy from the center. It is in this context of balancing federal accommodation with strong central powers that Article 370 was adopted and implemented. With this background, we shall now look into what is centralization and what is decentralization and the differences between the two, and as well the advantages and disadvantages of centralization and decentralization. Centralization is a form of organizational structure where the decision-making capability rests with the top management. A couple of hand-picked members are entitled to create strategies, determine the goals and objectives based on which an organization will function. In a centralized organization, the top management sets the rules and procedures which are then communicated to the lower level employees who are expected to carry out the same without questioning the authority. The advantage of such a structure is it allows the employees to have a well-defined framework within which all work needs to be carried out. The disadvantages of such a structure is that it increases the time taken to arrive at a decision. As decision-making authority lies with selected people from top management, it may result in biased decision-making in some cases. Meaning of decentralization. It is another form of organizational structure that functions by delegating decision-making capabilities to multiple teams across geographies. In such an organization, most of the planning, strategy, and decision to implement them are taken by the people in the middle and lower level of management. In decentralization, the employees are empowered to make their own decisions that will benefit the organization, which results in a high level of employee satisfaction and boosts the productivity of an organization. Decentralization therefore enables the lower level employees to gain leadership skills which can contribute to the growth of the organization in the long run. So by now you would have understood the meaning of centralization and decentralization. Coming to the principles being followed in both the categories. When the ability to take the choice rests with the administration, it is called centralization. But when the ability to take the choice is given to the individual playing out the activity, it is called decentralization. So by this you would have clearly understood what lies with the centralization and decentralization. According to Henry Fayol, the principles of centralization and decentralization are There ought to be an appropriate harmony among the centralization and decentralization, and there should be a match between these two, relying on the size, nature, and area of business. So this indicates the difference between the centralization and decentralization. So the top management lies in center as far as the centralization is concerned, whereas in decentralization the middle and lower level management, they work in coordination with each other. Coming to the types of centralization, there are three types. Departmental centralization, which alludes to the grouping of specific enacts as a rule in one office. For instance, enrollment for the entire association might be done by a solitary office. Centralization of performance. It shows geographic focus, for instance, an organization working in a solitary area. Centralization as an aspect of management which demonstrates a propensity to confine assignment of basic leadership. The types of decentralization are deconcentration, delegation, and devolution. Anything which is used mostly in the unitary states and redistributes the basic leadership and executive's obligation are considered to be deconcentration. The focal governments exchanging the duty regarding the basic leadership and organization of open capacities are considered as delegation. When governments decline capacities, they exchange expert for basic leadership back and the board to semi-self-governing units of nearby government with corporate status, which indicates the devolution. Now, the differences between the centralization and the decentralization are given in a tabular form. Anything that is the decision making with the top management is centralization, whereas the decision making across the multiple levels is decentralization. In centralization, the flow of information is vertical, whereas the flow of information is open and free in decentralization. Centralization is ideal for small-sized organization, whereas the large-sized organizations are ideal for decentralization. In centralization, the work is comparatively slow, but in decentralization, which is significantly faster. In centralization, few people involved in decision-making process, but more people involved in the decision-making process of decentralization. In centralization, the employee may be demotivated, but the employees of decentralized organization are highly motivative in nature. In centralization, least likely to occur, but most likely to occur in decentralization. Centralization is relatively stable, whereas in decentralization, there is a prone to instability. The advantages between these two are the centralization. They have a clear chain of command, it has a centered vision, decrease the expenses, and fast execution of choices is made in centralization. Whereas the decentralization, there are expansion of exercises, advancement of the managerial personnel, successful control and supervision, and there is an enhancement of management as well. Disadvantages. In centralization, there is a bureaucratic administration, it has a remote control, it has got the deference in work, and there is an absence of representative devotion. Whereas in decentralization, there are some problems of coordination, external factors, there is an increase in the administrative price as well as there is a high cost of operation. So looking into all these things, when we conclude the topic on the difference between the centralization and decentralization, the centralization gets consistency approach and handles the crisis instantly and successfully. Decentralization guarantees the dynamic working of staff and it arouses them. The true achievement of association between the two relies upon a reasonable mix of centralization and decentralization. There is a legitimate blend of both is required since they are entangled points. Thank you very much. I will see you all in the next video with another important topic.